I'm going to say like no veggies. I don't like your joke.
I mean, it was less. Yeah, I know. I was well.
Teacher, well, that made me feel real old.
Yeah, sorry, that's my little You're going to run 3 hours a day. That's almost Yep. All right, the clock is 5:45, so let's get going. Jen, you can take roll.
Amy Riddle Swanson. Here. Mark Hillman. Angie Skilling. Here. Carl Palmer.
Here.
Dave Smith.
Here.
Dominique Stewart. Here. Rachel Henderson. Dale Dahlke.
Here.
Amber Kirsting. Here.
Okay, we have 7 of 9. That's a quorum. Shall we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The school district of the Menominee area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Recommendations and commendations, I believe we have.
Agenda order stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry, agenda order. Sorry, yep, agenda order. Any proposed agenda revisions? Sorry, Board Docs is reloading, so okay. Try that again. We have one commendation. Dale, would you like to present it?
Sure. Mike, are you here tonight? Board of Education, Menominee District, would like to recognize Mike Kennedy. Thank you for working hard through difficult situations this year and supporting all staff and students at River Heights. You are appreciated for all you do. Thank you very much. On a personal note, Mike was nominated by his staff members and very special. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Dale. And I did want to point out, each quarter, the district administration meets with our quality improvement committees of staff members. And I think in my 10 years, other than maybe a principal retiring, usually the recommendations are for other staff members. And the committee felt strongly that Mr. Kennedy has really done a great job, and that's real kudos for Mike Kennedy, the principal at River Heights, to be recognized by staff. So great job, Mike.
Next, we have the highlight on youth. Would you hear that?
Thanks, Abe. And hopefully everyone's getting used to these highlight on youth reports. Attached in board docs for anybody to see is the December highlight on youth report. I'm not going to go through it piece by piece, but I do want to point out that there's some terrific stuff about work that was done with Veterans Day in November, also the fall musical at Menominee High School, and just a lot of different activities both inside and outside. Also, there's a picture of a service dog that was at Oakland Elementary School. I know that got a lot of play on social media recently, a lot of positive comments and such. So just a terrific job by the students and staff, and that's this month's highlight on Youth Report.
I did make it to the bingo last time and had a great time actually for the SOAR program at the ale house. It was packed for folks raising money for the field trips and whatnot for the SOAR program.
Next, we have Student Representative Communications.
Student Council is thrilled to share the incredible journeys and achievements of our fellow students from various departments and clubs across our school. Mr. Schwartz and Ms. Tempest recently attended an insightful conference focusing on ACT reading strategies. Their commitment to bringing back innovative testing approaches promises to equip our juniors with the tools they need for success. The Finance Bowl was an absolute blast for our students, igniting their passion for competition. Our juniors are already buzzing about participating again next year, highlighting the fun and valuable experiences this event offers. Wrestler Brayton Casey achieving his 100th career win at the Board Highland Tournament is a testament to his dedication and the support he receives from the school community. The winter concert on December 11th promises to be a mesmerizing showcase of musical talent featuring the Jazz Ensemble, Mustang Band, and Wind Symphony. Moreover, the connections made by Mr. Carcula with guest artists like the UW-Madison Faculty Brass Quintet and Kenny Holman truly amplify the learning experience for our aspiring musicians. FBLA has been nothing short of inspiring. From educational tours to impactful community engagements like Trick or Can or raising awareness for prematurity awareness, our members are setting a high bar for active participation and community service. DECA's recent Mr. Menominee competition was a resounding success, raising over $4,300 for St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. Witnessing our students' commitment to philanthropy and making a difference is heartwarming. Science Olympiad's stellar third-place finish out of 63 teams is a demonstration of their hard work and amazing effort. With a vibrant mix of seasoned members and a wave of enthusiastic freshmen, the team is poised for continued success, including hosting the regional tournament at MHS. Lastly, as Student Council, we're eagerly preparing for exciting upcoming events like Cabin Fever and introducing a winter formal, aiming to bring the student body together for unforgettable experiences. Some members of Student Council also recently attended the WASC Fall Leadership Tour. There, they got to listen to an inspirational keynote speaker who shared his story of resiliency. They attended breakout sessions, and a few members of the council also led a breakout session. They shared out about our homecoming and how other schools can make their own homecoming more engaging for their schools. At the most recent council meeting, we also approved grants for FFA, Multicultural Club, and Unified PE class. Proceeds from our dances are used to fund the grant program. Thank you for your continuous support in fostering an environment where our students can flourish and shine brightly in their endeavors.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Abe, one more thing to add. Congratulations to all the students who are involved in the recent musical at the Mabel Tainter Theater. Sold out so much that's added another show. That's pretty terrific. And then also, I just want to give a shout out to the girls basketball team. The varsity team with Coach Harmon is undefeated. They're 6-0, and they actually play at home twice this week, both on Tuesday and on Friday. So if you want to see some talented students, you could head to the band concert tonight, girls basketball on Tuesday and Friday. It's just terrific. Our kids are doing wonderful things.
I was going to say, I was hoping that the report would involve a musical number and some glitter cannons, but unfortunately not. Additionally, the concert is tonight at 7, so I'm mindful of the time. I'm going to try to move things along. Next up is community communications. We have 3 tonight. The first is Josie Nolan.
I'm Josie Pillman, and I live in Wisconsin. I am within the school district. Dr. Zadowski and school board members, I have concerns about the present SDMA gender policy plan and its dangers to our transgender and gender non-conforming students. The policy does not speak truth into the lives of these students. It tells them that a student can act on his feelings in regard to gender. Furthermore, it instructs fellow peers and counselors and teachers alike that they are restricted from helping these students deal with gender identity issues, lest truth-telling be labeled discrimination, harassment, and bullying. Chloe is a teenager, probably out of high school by now, who testified before Congress. She found herself in a dark place. She began to believe that she was a boy born in a girl's body. Chloe began to try to change from a girl to a boy. She had several surgeries and was on hormone blockers and was taking testosterone. In short, she was believing the lie that she could change her body into a boy's body. Eventually, after irreversible damage had been done, Chloe saw the light and realized that what she had done. It was too late. She probably will never be able to biologically parent a child, all because at a very young age she was being fed a lie about gender transition and she believed it. No one in her life was able to convince her of the truth, not teachers, counselors, or peers that she was harming herself in a way that was life-changing. That lie that Chloe was being taught was not kind or good or moral. However, Chloe is damaged for life right now. She carries many regrets. The SDMA Gender Policy Plan was written in 2018. It is concerning to me because some of our teachers or counselors might just try to follow it, and some of our students might just try to follow it. This will not be good. It would cause great harm, even harming the next generation. So I appeal to you school board members, for the sake of our children and their parents, and for the sake of our school district, take a fresh look at this policy. We do not want to have more students like Chloe who will live the rest of their lives with regrets because someone did not have the courage to tell them the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Tracy Wheeler.
Joyce Schuler, Menominee. Something different but related tonight. There's a new refugee resettlement office in Eau Claire with a resettlement radius of 100 miles, so that includes us. Their stated plan for next year is to resettle 75 refugees, quote, likely representing 15 to 20 family units, unquote. This is meant to be, as far as we know, a permanent office, so we can assume that at least that number will be arriving into the Chippewa Valley every year for the foreseeable future. Legal family reunification in these traditionally large families can substantially increase those numbers further. Likely countries of origin are Burma, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Somalia. Why am I bringing this to you tonight? Because the SDMA has more to lose by this resettlement than most. Do you have any translators who speak the languages of Burma or the Congo? What do those translators cost? What are the logistics and expenses for you related to serving these families in the manner you will be required to do if that office decides to resettle refugee families in Menominee? The refugees are very likely coming from Muslim countries. How will this affect our school system? They ain't gonna like your library books. An October 14, 2022 article in Newsweek reports 600 people at a school board meeting in Dearborn, Michigan. Muslim parents were objecting to LGBTQ+ affirming books in the school libraries and booing and jeering speakers who spoke for the books. By the way, one of the books they were objecting to was, this book is gay. The way federal law is written, the selection of resettlement sites is supposed to be done by consulting actively in advance with local governments and groups that will be affected, and this has not been done. The resettlement office seems to have been opened at the request of the Eau Claire City Administrator behind closed doors. Your advocacy team might want to look into this matter and what legal recourse you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize for the misplaced alarm. Next up, we have Mike Cooper.
Mike Cooper, Menominee, Wisconsin. Good evening, and hello again. Over the last few months, I have been introducing to you the idea of interposition, which is the responsibility of any lesser magistrate You, as board members, have been reduced to being lesser magistrates. Originally, you were supposed to oversee the running of schools in the district, but the federal and state governments have usurped the power away from you. So now you are the lesser magistrate. That makes your responsibility to students, parents, and taxpayers even more important. To refresh your memories, interposition is where the magistrate puts him or herself between the student and the corrupt upper magistrate, i.e. state or federal governments and the likes of the NEA. To make any sense of this, one must define what is the goal of the school district. Is it to prepare independent thinkers who can choose what is best for themselves, or is it to indoctrinate them in the predetermined ideology, such as SEL, CRT, gender dysphoria, misnamed as transgenderism? Do you sit on your hands and say, well, we have these federal and state regulations, or if we swallow the SEL pill, we'll get funding from the state and the feds? How is that in the best interests of the students or the parents? You ran for this position. You were elected by a small percentage of the voting public, but now you are going to be asked to step up and do what is right. Most parents want their children to learn how to read and write, how to do math, know who the wonderful men and women were who founded this country and what the Constitution is and how it impacts them. Those founders were so concerned about the education of the citizenry, they included funding in the Northwest Ordinance with this statement: religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall ever be encouraged. So, which side are you on? The side of indoctrination and the lies, which is the side of, as Vladimir Lenin called them, useful idiots, or are you on the side of morality and the education of well-rounded, thoughtful citizens who can have a chance at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? See you next time. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the revenue and expenditure reports for the month of November 2023.
Unfortunately, Leah is not able to join us tonight, but she did prepare the reports for the board to review. So unless there's any questions, this is for informational purposes only. Any questions tonight?
The next agenda item is the monthly employment report for November 2023.
Similar to the last item, this is an informational piece that the board receives on a monthly basis. So the board members have received it. Are there any questions tonight?
All right, the next item will be on the consent agenda. We have minutes from November 13th, 16th, and 27th, financial reports, the general fund checks in amount of $2,107,603.26, cash receipts of $68,717.98 for November 2023, no donations exceeding $1,000 for this month, and various approvals for fishing club, Nordic club, and out-of-state travel.
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
Any comments or questions before we vote? All right, let's go ahead. All right, motion passes 7-0. Next item, action to approve the personnel consent agenda involving one resignation, one retirement, and one employment request to hire. Any commentary, Jeff?
I'd just like to say that we're disappointed that we do have a teacher resignation. However, we understand the personal circumstances and sure appreciate all of her great work at the middle school. And then also Karen Wick will be retiring at the end of the school year, and we wish Ms. Wick well and thank her for her years of service. Lastly, I do want to point out, sorry Dave, I do want to point out that Samantha Hoyt, Mr. Betcher, and the team did a great job finding an English replacement, and we're very pleased and impressed with the replacement. So you're approving both a resignation and a hire tonight, and we expect a very smooth transition.
Was the replacement internal, Joe?
No.
Okay.
Agreed, that's very impressive to have such a fast turnaround time mid-year. That's really impressive. Entertain a motion to proceed with, to approve the consent agenda, the personal consent agenda.
I so move.
I'll second.
Any other questions or commentary? All right, let's vote. Motion passes 7-0. Next item is a single action agenda item, approval of the district calendar for 2024-2025 academic year. Joe, you want to summarize the changes from last time?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I make a motion that we approve the calendar as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by Carl, second by Amy. Joe, you want to introduce the calendar?
Sure, the calendar is very similar to what the board reviewed a couple weeks ago. However, after meeting with the staff and having our QIC meeting, a few modifications were made. Winter break has been reduced by a couple days, and school will resume on January 2nd. By having students come back for a couple days earlier, that provides for an opportunity, first of all, for school to be completed during the first week of June and not having to have the teachers come back at all in the second week. And then it also allows for an additional day in the spring and moving the April PE, Professional Development Day, into January. We heard, especially from the high school staff, that having a Professional Development Day after the end of the first semester provides for a smoother transition for both students and staff. So Professional Development Day has been added on January 20th. The other thing about coming back a little bit early from winter break, it provides what we call a soft landing for both students and staff. So after having that time off, students are able to come back to school and staff on a shortened week and get back into the swing of things after the holidays. It also pays dividends for our hourly staff. They are not employees that can have their pay spread out through the entire year. So by having 2 work days, that makes it a little easier for hourly staff who otherwise have sometimes have a difficult time with paychecks around the longer breaks. So it is recommended by the administration and the QIC group that the board approve this calendar.
And at QIC meeting last week, both Rachel and I were there, and there was a very thorough discussion about that trade-off. January 20th and June 9th, and I think that I think both of our impressions that through that discussion with the staff, that the staff needs really were quite strong in favor of what's currently presented. Are there other questions or commentary on the calendar? Let's go ahead and vote. Motion passes 7-0, so now you all can go ahead and schedule your vacation. Next up, we have several discussion items. The first is a report on 2023 Wisconsin Act 20.
I'd like to thank Assistant Superintendent for curriculum instruction, Brian Segwood, for putting this report together. Also, Tara Ellison, our district reading specialist, is here tonight. You've all met Tara before. And they're not going to go into great detail on Act 20. Well, we're still kind of figuring things out. I think the state is still kind of figuring things out. Not to steal your thunder, but Brian and Tara, go ahead and take it away.
All right, no problem at all. With the major goals and objectives for the year, one of the things that we had identified was provide an update on Wisconsin Act 20 once we got a little ways into the year, and had learned a little bit more about Wisconsin's new early reading law. The early reading law was signed into effect this summer to begin planning for. It states that schools are required to provide specific science-based early literacy instruction, both for universal and interventional settings. It applies to students in grades 4K through 3rd grade, and what I will call the initial implementation does not go into effect until next school year. So it is nice that we have a year to gear up for it. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Tara for a little bit to talk about some of the work that we've done up to this point.
Okay, I'm not going to read through the whole timeline thing that I put together, because I think you can see it, but I'll just kind of summarize it a little bit. So we're currently in steps 1, 2, and 3. So we're a little bit ahead of the game. We've already selected a science-based reading program for K-5. So that's underway, last year with 3-5 and this year with K-2. So we're really busy implementing that and getting our teachers trained. Brian and I are super busy, just like learning about everything, attending webinars. And the state, as they both kind of alluded to, it's very busy right now too. We're not sure, but we're hoping they figure some things out for us so we can move on past step 3. Next year will be a big year for us. Once we get some direction from the state, we'll have to make some changes as far as maybe some reading plans for students that meet certain requirements, and potentially start a new screener and a new diagnostic screener. But you're in good hands. We're prepared for what they can throw at us, and we're keeping on top of everything. So that's the main point for everything. You're in good hands. So anyway, looking at the timeline, steps 4 and 5 and 6 for that. I guess Mike Kennedy here, but admin will be trained in a specific type of reading that the state wants us to get trained in, and that will happen for our K-5 principals and the 2 of us, followed by our teachers. So we all have some direction on that coming. We don't have a lot of that right now to share, but we're keeping on top of that and attending webinars on potential trainings for both of those 2 groups of people. So that is kind of it in a nutshell. We don't have a lot more direction, but we are keeping up with whatever they're throwing at us.
I guess one of the other things to share, when we take a look at our current structure for early literacy in the district, our structure is currently set up where really some of the tools that we use are what will change, but the process that we use as far as we already have a screener in place. We already provide interventions for students who may not meet identified benchmarks. That's currently part of our process. So it's really just a refining of some of the tools, and maybe some of the identified benchmarks might change. But overall, we're well equipped to do that. One of the pieces that we'll continue to take a look at, funding that goes along with that. We know that there will be certain aspects that there will be some funding as far as the screening assessment. We already have an opportunity to receive some reimbursement, not necessarily for full cost, but some reimbursement for that process that we already have. But there are some pieces that are yet to be determined, and the state has not identified whether or not there will be direct funding that goes along with some of this, or if this is something that will be included in our existing budget. So what I will say with that is, because many of these processes are things that we already have in place, I think as we learn more, we'll be able to adjust for that. But as the tools are laid out, then we can make our final selections. So with that, any questions that you have, I'm happy to take those at this time.
I have a question.
Go ahead, you first.
I have a question. My question is, Tara, you're very well versed in reading and you understand how to teach reading. Is this new thing, is it kind of like new in that it is going to provide better readers, do you think? Or we don't know yet?
I think it will.
Okay.
I mean, I do. I mean, anytime you provide extra training to your teachers, I mean, and if they go through with what the state has proposed, they will have 40 hours of intensive professional development, which that's kind of unheard of, to be able to do something like that. So that alone, I mean, our teachers are teaching phonics, and they have been teaching phonics. So it's just a slight change in that respect, you know what I mean? I mean, you have good teachers on our staff that are already trained in how to teach reading, but this will enhance it.
And the reason I ask that is because I've heard through the grapevine from some people in the legislature that were not happy with it and thought it was like dictating too much of what teachers are told to do and not being able to teach, you know, that they were dictating as to the style or what they had to use to do it. You know, so I don't know enough about it to combat that question or that concern, which is why I was asking. You know, and also I learned by phonics, and a couple years later my brother came along, and he learned by sight, and I think the whole language method. And of the two of us, I'm a much better reader.
And not to go into this too much, but you know, as we're talking about it, I think back to Mike Cooper's comments there about lesser magistrate. I think that might be some of the pill that's a little tough to swallow. Is when you think about adopting certain things on a statewide basis, knowing that well, there's certain similarities all the way across the state. There's a reason why there's local school boards, and there's a reason why there's local decisions. And I think that might be a little bit difficult for some people. But as Tara and Brian alluded to, Menominee has done such a good job over the years of studying the most recent research and making adjustments as needed, not only based on the different tools and resources that are available, but also as the needs of our children change. So this really isn't that big of a deal for us. I mean, everything's a big deal, but you know, this is standard practice for us, is trying to do what's best. And you know, right now, what's best is focusing more on, you know, phonics and the science-based approach. You know, we're all ready to go. The process is in place, and it's just a matter of moving forward. And we're ahead of the curve, and I feel really good about it. When I go to regional superintendent meetings and hear about some of the challenges of some other school districts, however, I do think that this law is going to create some real challenges because there is not enough funding attached to it. I mean, when they talk about hiring, what was it, 64 reading coaches across the state, well, what are 64 reading coaches going to do on a statewide basis? And then, where are those reading coaches going to come from? I mean, what I am concerned with is if someone like Tara was to leave for a state job, and she's not going to. You know, I think, you know, and that's a concern with all of these coaching positions is, in many cases, you're taking your best teachers out of the classroom. So we could go on and on and on about this, but at the end of the day, Tara hit it on the head. We're in good hands. And Brian hit it on the head. We have a great process, and we'll move forward like we need to.
Would it be fair to, I'm making an assumption, you tell me if I'm wrong, that if you boil this down backwards, where did this come from? Probably there was data around the state that reading wasn't doing so hot, is my guess. Is that?
Around the United States.
Yeah, and well, as far as the state government decision to push for it, there is a universal feeling maybe that reading in Wisconsin needs to improve, even when there's pockets of schools like Menominee that are already doing evidence-based interventions, so.
I think the intent is good. The intent is to try to improve test scores. But again, you know, we measure student success by a lot of different things, including test scores. But when you talk about, you know, the overall success and overall well-being of our children, there's more to consider than just the reading curriculum being used in the classroom.
I have two kind of in-the-weeds questions about the impact on staff. So I know that at River Heights, I believe this, so I know in the second grade at River Heights, they're having a new reading program this year, which is, I think as a parent, is phenomenal. I've been really impressed with the material there. I also know it's been a ton of work with its teachers to update. It's a very well-integrated curriculum, which requires a lot of prep work. I'm curious on things like that, where we're already in a process of doing new curriculum. Is that curriculum still going to hold, or do they have to redo it all again in a year or so?
No, it will hold in the state of Wisconsin, we're not going to have to pick, like in New York, we have to pick between 3 or something. I don't think Wisconsin's doing that. They're going to have a list of ones that districts can apply to get some reimbursement from, as long as we don't go too far off and we've done a specific curriculum, which we aren't. Our new one is, and it's rated all, all green across the board on all aspects of teaching reading and writing. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely, thank you.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like it's more about, not so much about necessarily a particular curriculum, but more about the training and process and improvement and identification of need throughout the district, which is really kind of the administrative training test. On that point, I think you just said 40 hours of PE for the teachers. How is that going to, what are your concerns in terms of displacing other critical PD, unlimited PD days and hours?
So, yeah. The nice thing with this is the PD for teachers, it's identified that it needs to begin by July of 2025, as opposed to being completed by a particular time. So that when we take a look at our existing PD structure, it will impact the PD structure as to what we do. One of the things we prided ourselves on in the district is being able to have a lot of choice in what that PD time looks like. This will occupy a chunk of that PD time. But it identifies clearly when it needs to begin by, as opposed to when it needs to be concluded by.
And to be clear, is that onboarding PD, or is this an annual requirement of 40 hours?
So it's an onboarding piece. And there is an element that teacher preparation programs, after a certain point, also have to incorporate much of this as well. So,
Thank you.
And for informational purposes, the calendar that the board just approved, we have 10 days of professional development scheduled for next year for all teachers. That's another area where we're in good hands and where we are ready, not only for this professional development, but other professional development that teachers need. Whereas some districts, they do not have that level of commitment to professional development. So it's another spot where you can see that we're well positioned for this type of activity.
Other comments or questions on this discussion item?
I just want to say that I appreciate all that you do. And I never, intended to make, say it wasn't right or good. I just don't know more about it. So, but I do know it's in good hands. So.
Okay, if there's no other comments, our next item is review 2023-2024 budget revisions.
So again, Leah is not here tonight, but she did prepare the budget revisions for the board to review. And for background, in the December meeting each year, we bring the first round of budget revisions for the board. You will review these, or you have reviewed them tonight. And then in January, Leah will bring, in your background package, she'll send you these revisions along with any updates that happen between now and January. And typically the board approves the first set of budget revisions in January, and then again in the spring, and then one more time at the end of the year in June. So, as you can see, most of this is just a matter of moving budgeted figures from one area of the budget to the other. Eve, I know you had suggested at a previous revision that we totaled it up, and I think that's something Leah could do. But essentially these are pretty much all net zero in terms of ins and outs. But Leah can speak better to these at the next meeting. If you do have any particular questions, I would encourage you to email those in ahead of time, and we can certainly have the information for you. Any questions I can try to help with tonight? You can see most of these are related to grants, title grants, the Cargill grant, and just making sure that everything adds up for the grants.
Any questions? I have a couple I'll email in, but we don't need to discuss them now. Item C, review the number of regular and special education spaces available for open enrollment.
So Tonya takes care of this for our school district, and this is something the board sees at this time every year. Tonya, if you want to go ahead, please share with the board.
Yeah, so this is a requirement before the open enrollment window
for applications open up. We need to determine number of seats available in regular ed and special education. This report is very similar to past years and how it's formatted and how I calculate that. So of course I try to make best guess projections moving into next year. I look at class sizes and I shift everything over a year. So if you're currently a 5th grader, I kind of bump that up to 6th grade and look at that as a middle school level. As you can see, for regular ed seats, even for our board policy, there's no class size limit for that. But for special education, I use a caseload factoring. It is a kind of an old model. However, it's the only model that we kind of really have out here to kind of look at students and the caseloads for special education teachers. And as you can see, when I project into next year, in all grade levels in programs, we have no seats available for open enrollment purposes. So when we get applications for open enrollment, if they are a student outside of our district asking to open enroll in, and they have an IEP, that is something I will review, and I will look at this, my calculations, and that's how we determine whether we accept that as an open enrolled student or we decline them as an open enrolled student. So, any questions?
I would like to point out that, as you know, we transfer millions of dollars from the general fund into special education each year. And not having additional space for open enrollment in the special education area is partially a product of underfunding special needs. We simply do not receive enough aid to pay for the high cost of special education. It is a very high priority for us in our school district, and our teachers and staff do a remarkable job. But with the way that the budget works and the way that the finances work, it simply is not prudent to open up additional seats for special education at this time. We do have space, however, in the general education setting.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
This will come back in January.
Thank you. Next item, policy 451.2, student immunization.
So Tony will cover these as well, but before she does, I'd like to applaud both her and our school district nurse, Rainey McMahon. They have been working on these policies, reviewing policy examples from the School Board Association, also considering past practice and current practice in the school district. So with that being said, Tony, if you could please introduce these policy changes, that would be terrific.
Yes. So the first one is student immunizations. This policy, I don't think, was last looked at in 2002, so quite a while ago. So there is some kind of like changes in some of the language that needs to be corrected, like the Department of Health. It used to be Department of Health and Family Services, so we just are taking that out to making that just a little more accurate. And then adding a paragraph in there that talks about the requirements and notification that our school nurse follows in the district. And then along, I think it's with that one, we have a rule. So when we were looking at model policies, we're looking at model policies, we looked at other policies from other districts, and then Rainey worked with her group of other like area school nurses to look at getting recommendations. We did not previously have a rule that went along with that. So this rule really is aligned with our current practices that our school nurse uses when we talk about student immunizations.
So this policy, and if there's questions, that's great, but this policy would then come back to the board for a final reading at the next school board meeting, and then once the policy is approved, then the rule would go into official effect.
Do you happen to know, either by number or by percentage, roughly how many students in the district do pursue exceptions?
It's a very small number. You probably could count it on one hand. Occasionally, we'll get a medical exemption that we have a doctor's note, and other ones it's a private or personal preference of not getting immunization. I think we're seeing a little bit of an increase in that, but not a significant one. And our school nurse works with every family to ensure that they're either in compliance or they have that exemption on file. So, yep.
Other questions or comments from the board?
I just appreciate that new red text in the policy itself about providing information to families on a scheduled basis like that. Because most of the time, if we don't give them the information, they're getting it somewhere that is unvetted, or, so I think that's very helpful.
Okay, if there's no other comments, we'll move on to the next discussion item. Policy 453, administration of medication to students.
All right, so this is a new policy, and this is really coming about. We're getting more families, requesting from families for our school staff to administer supplements to their students. So these are not prescription, these are supplements. And so we didn't really have a policy that kind of addressed that. So I think the need, our school nurse was really looking for some guidance on that and some policy. Again, we looked at model policy, we looked at, Randy worked with other area school nurses to determine kind of what they're doing. And then this is really what we came up with. For prescription medication or non-prescription medication, this is really how practice, what we are currently doing. But we really needed something that addressed some of those really non-prescription supplement that we're bringing requests for school staff to administer.
Questions or comments from the board?
How about the kid that has the asthma for sports, induced asthma, and can they carry that inhaler at a track meet without?
Yeah. We have many students that carry. Typically, they come accompanied with a doctor's note. Kids with diabetes that need to carry their emergency medication. It's typically in their school orders that we get from doctors. And then if they're not, even if our school staff feels that a student should be carrying it, our school nurse works with that healthcare provider to create a plan for that.
So is that covered under a separate policy? This is essentially speaking to staff providing the medication?
That would be considered under procedures. So with this, there is a potential little rule coming along with this afterwards. But we really wanted to get the policy up and running so that we could address some of the requests that we're currently getting in.
So I read it fast. So
Yes.
does it mention student administered in here at all?
I don't want to be, I looked at this, we did this last week, so I had a weekend. This is more administrating of, this policy really addresses, it's the staff administering the medication or handing over the medication. Not necessarily the student administering their own medication.
My understanding reading the policy, at least the way I read it, is that in situations where there's kind of ongoing medical concern, there would be a standing agreement between the nurse and the, either medical professionals in the family about what that student needs. That would be
Yes.
they'd have that on file. And so that it would be understood, at the beginning of the year, for example, that student would be having whatever, is appropriate for them medically.
Yes, so any student that has an ongoing medical issue, there are or procedures in the nurse's office that are available for the school nurse to follow. So students with asthma, students with diabetes, and those get updated frequently based on the student's medical needs. So things like if they need to carry certain medication, if that medication needs to be in the health office, or how that gets transported.
To Carl's point, and maybe Mr. Drake or Mr. Gutcher would be able to comment, or we can come back and comment more next time, but I know there are rules at our schools about what students are able to have in terms of medication, and I believe some of that is covered in the student handbook. Not to put you guys in the spot, do you have anything to comment on tonight, or should we bring this back in January and answer Carl's question? Let's bring it back in January. So
I mean, I'm very
science-specific
comfortable,
language.
I don't want to get in the weeds, of this work.
But now's the time, that's a good
But it's
question.
the question, and I trust that if the question's asked you guys, and Ramey, Ramey since we worked together in the ICU, I trust Ramey beyond. So, that's just, I assume we cover it somewhere, it's just not covered in here.
Yeah.
And if it's not covered somewhere, then it probably should be.
It really, the students that carry their own medication, a lot goes into deciding, working with the healthcare provider, working with the family. Age is one of them. I mean, as kids get older, they tend to then carry their own medication, whereas younger kids, we tend to keep it in the health office or close to a student. So in the middle school, it might be housed, if a student is too far away from the health office, it may get housed somewhere else in the building, so it's closer to the student if they would need it.
How would it get handled if a student is carrying around one of these auto injectors or an inhaler and they don't have it in their plan, they don't have it?
If we would find out that they have it.
If they're afoul of our procedures, does staff know how to manage that?
Yeah, and that usually gets referred to our school
Just
nurse.
to the nurse.
Then our school nurse works with the family and then the healthcare provider to see, if they really do need to carry it, and if they don't need to carry it, how can we address that? So.
Okay, one last tiny nitpicky question. And it may just be beneficial where we talk about a healthcare provider. So if the medication's over the counter, the parent can say, yep, give my kid 2 Tylenols. That's within the prescription, the FDA approved dosing on the bottle. If the parent says, give my kid 10 Tylenols, this says a provider's note has to accompany that.
Yes.
But what we don't do is say what a provider is.
And Ramey and I had a long conversation about this, because some of the providers are not necessarily what you would think of as, we have chiropractors that send up notes, we have different types of what we would call healthcare providers that's not necessarily a doctor. So we were trying to be, encompass all of those that we get notes for.
I think there has to be care to the liability. So it's over the counter, but it's still a medication.
Yep.
That someone who's a holistic practitioner, nothing against them, but if you're going to go off label to something that can have harm, there's a risk there.
Yep, the same as that we're getting with a lot of these supplements that are, we're getting families asking us to give to their student. So when we talked about that language, I'm comfortable with it because Randy was comfortable with it. And so, but if we want to be stronger in our language there, we definitely can.
No, I defer to Rainey. It's just kind of the question to make sure it's discussed and that you're all comfortable with it.
Yeah, I had very much the same question. I think in my own head I came to the same conclusion, that you could go down the path of requiring licensing and so on, but then you basically become your own little FDA in the school. You don't want to do that, right?
No.
You want to, you have to be somewhat deferential to the practitioners that the family goes to, because we are a public institution, all sorts of backgrounds and all different interests. But I think there is a liability question there that I think I trust the school nurse to make that call from her own knowledge to say, I am not comfortable with this. And what do you do in that situation, I guess, is the key question.
I think there is a difference between a supplement and something that is even over the counter. Just, again, for discussion, take it back. But, right, if someone with no medical training writes a note and says that child should have 10,000 milligrams of Tylenol, they're gonna go to the emergency room pretty soon.
Yeah.
So
And
it's different.
Yeah, and Rainey, I am very comfortable. There has been many times that Rainey will ask the family if she can speak with the doctor. That she's not understanding the order, she wants to make sure she verifies there's something that tells her that it's maybe not correct, and then she will have that conversation before administering anything or delegating that administration to somebody else. So all of those things do get looked at. Just because they come in doesn't mean that Rainey is not looking at them. She is looking at them and using her professional knowledge to say.
And she's licensed to do so.
Yes, yep.
And one final point to Carl's earlier question, I had the opportunity to pull up the high school handbook, and at the end of page 7 and then into page 8, there's a whole section about medication, and it also cites state statute 118.291 having to do with students being allowed to possess asthma inhalers, and there's different protocols in place. So it is covered, but I think we'll make sure we do a crosswalk between the new policy and the handbooks with whatever handbook recommendations are brought to the board for 2024, 2025.
I have a clarifying question for a non-medical person. You used the word supplement several times, and which is not in here, so then I got a little lost. And so does supplement mean a non-prescription drug or there was another phrase in here, sorry, non-drug health-related substance?
Yes, that's probably the more technical term, and I'm using supplement as maybe the term that is more, I would say, a non-medical person myself would use, I would probably use that.
Got it, thank you.
Yep.
Maybe Carl should comment on this, but it was my impression that in this document, in my mind, there are 3 things kind of outlined. There's prescriptions, which are regulated and tightly controlled. There's FDA-approved over-the-counter drugs, like Tylenol, for example. And then there's other things that could be, what was the term? Health-related substances, right? Which don't even have FDA approval. They're just
Like bee pollen.
Yeah, exactly, right, yeah. Or
Like bee pollen nuggets,
Yeah.
or
wheatgrass,
or
yeah,
whatever.
or
Vitamins, maybe?
It's non-regulated, so.
It's non-regulated,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think we're seeing more and more of those things kind of pop up, so.
And so that's the case where it's really a lot fuzzier about what the right kind of role is. Yeah. So I think this is a good policy, and I think you've done a really good job of finding that something that's both, protects the kids and protects the school and makes the policy reasonably clear. The only thing I would ask is that as this becomes policy, or something close to this becomes policy, making sure when we update the parent-facing website, that it's easy for people to figure out what they need to do to, like, if as a parent who's not going to read and this is a good policy as a legal policy, but also there's the question of it's 7:45, the bus is coming. Where do I need to get my kid to carry this to school, or what do I need to call? What do I need to do?
And we can definitely put something on the website that looks at, like, what, maybe some more clear steps on what parents, if it's a prescription, non-prescription.
And actually, the current parent-facing website on medicine at school, medication at school, is actually quite clear, I think. This is a question of if it's aligned with this policy as this becomes in place.
I just have a quick, maybe it's a legality issue too, particularly for high school students, as they're getting older and have their own relationship with healthcare providers, that parents don't necessarily have the same sort of access to.
Yeah.
Can we say that written consent from parents or legal guardians is required? Or does there have to be another path for a student to get permission from a healthcare provider or something like that?
You say, like, if a student would go to the healthcare provider, have a note, and then bring that into the school?
If they're getting something that the parent is not involved in, which
Yep.
I kind of hate the idea of it, that's.
I think once they involve us as that third party is when that changes that. Rainey herself, as a school nurse, can have conversations with a student that she doesn't need to share because she's in the realm of a healthcare provider. But when you're asking a non-licensed healthcare provider potentially to administer a medication, they would need parent permission to do that. So that's where that kind of comes about. It's not always a licensed nurse is the one. She may delegate that duty to somebody else. That doesn't fall under that umbrella.
And as far as what Carl was saying, a student administering something to themselves during the day,
Yes.
that is okay?
Yeah, and let's admit this, we have high school students that probably carry ibuprofen that we don't know about, and parents think they're high school students, that they have things. I think we do our best at monitoring that, but the reality is we probably have some students that carry their own medication that we're unaware of, because they're high school students. Yeah.
Other questions or comments from the board on this topic? Okay, our next agenda item is a discussion of reviewing plans for sharing referendum information.
So the tech department helped create a new referendum information website, and it's linked into the public content for everyone to see, and I hope board members have had a chance to check that out a little bit. Before we talk about the upcoming referendum presentations though, and see if board members have any that they are planning to attend, I do want to point out that today was the deadline for our student contest. Students were provided the opportunity to create a pamphlet about the referendum. Clear instructions were provided along with the resources that are on the website. And it was clearly communicated that any kind of referendum information could not advocate for or against the referendum. Explained what prohibited means in my message to students. But we did receive one, and Kendra Schmidt is the student who put together the pamphlet that is attached for board members. I did communicate back and forth with Kendra a little bit, and I would like to use, I also talked with her mom, I would like to use her pamphlet. However, there's a few revisions that still need to be made just to make sure that it's clearly articulating the information and just some real minor stuff. But she just did an awesome job. She's an 8th grade student at Menominee Middle School. So kudos to Mr. Betcher and the middle school staff, along with her family. But you can see she just did a wonderful job on this. And later this week, I'll be initiating a student contest to create a 30-second commercial about the referendum. That commercial then can be shared on social media, also on Mustangs TV for all of our live stream events. The band program did a terrific commercial this past fall for the mattress sale that they had. And it's just a great way to get our students involved and also provide this important information for the community. With all that being noted, you can see that we have a number of public referendum presentations coming up. The first one being December 18th at Downsville Elementary School. We are going to host a referendum presentation at each school in the school district. That way we can get to families, and a lot of these presentations are tied together with other activities such as PTO meetings that may be occurring. I think Rachel said the one at Downsville, they're having a cookie decorating evening at 5:30, so I'm going to have to be quick on that one. But also I will be attending the City Council meeting on December 18th, later that evening. I will be attending the County Board meeting on January 17th. And also I know Abe and Rachel are planning to provide a presentation on Saturday, January 13th for the Community Conversations Group at Menominee Public Library. That also is open to the public and it's on our list. Once we have a presentation that we record, we will also provide that on the referendum website, so it'll be on demand for anybody who doesn't want to go out or they want to review the information again. The slides for the presentation, they're included in that referendum website, so people can take a look at those slides at their own time. There will be some other private presentations occurring. I know I'm going to be attending upon invitation to the Sunrise Rotary Club, also the Noon Rotary Club, And if there's any other groups that are interested. I have reached out to the League of Women Voters, and I'm still awaiting response as to whether or not that might work to provide a presentation. I'd really like to provide a presentation in the community. As much as we love having people come into our schools, we also know that it's important that we offer presentations in other community areas. So if there's any other town boards or anywhere else that is interested, the presentations can be as quick as 5-10 minutes or as long as an hour. It really depends on how much the group wants to hear and how many questions they may have. But we're definitely interested in providing information to the community so the community can make an informed choice on February 20th. So board members, just interested if you have any questions, any comments or suggestions, or any feedback about any of these presentations that you might want to share in terms of your availability. If we are going to have a quorum of board members at any of these particular presentations, I think it would be appropriate and important that we post those as a public meeting.
Is there still an office on aging in Dunn County? Supports the seniors?
I'm not sure about an office on aging.
There used to be a county office on aging, right? Is there still one?
Yeah.
That might, I don't know that they do events, but they may be an important place to funnel some information, and they may have ideas on how to reach the senior community.
Thanks, Carl. I'll make sure we check that out.
I just wanted to say it's a very full calendar, and thank you for your efforts in reaching out to all these different groups and locations. I think it's looking good for outreach. Other questions or comments on this agenda item?
So how are you going to regulate how many people are coming to any specific meeting?
Are you talking about school board members?
Yes.
Well, when we talked last time, it didn't appear that there'd be a quorum of board members at any particular meeting, but it might be helpful if either A, board members talk about it tonight or at the upcoming school board meetings and share which ones you're planning to attend, or at least let me know via email, text, or call, so that way we know. That would be helpful. Right now, the only one I'm aware of people attending would be December 18th when Rachel attends the Downsville Elementary presentation, and when Rachel and Abe attend the January 13th community conversations. Abe, I don't know if you were planning to attend the county board meeting or not.
I'll try to. It's on my calendar. That's January 17th, I think you said.
I might be at the January 13th one, but none of the others. I trust.
I could do it on the board if you want. That's helpful.
You know what, the way I see it is board members, you're certainly welcome to be as involved as you would like to be. And in fact, if there's part of the presentation that you would like to provide, that's okay with me as well. Otherwise, I guess the way I envision this would be for me to go through the presentation and answer questions. I do think having a board member or two in attendance not only sends a good message, but also it could provide for board members to share some thoughts. It is challenging though, because I know that none of you want to speak on behalf of the board necessarily outside the scope of what's been provided. It can be tricky as an individual board member, but I do think as individual board members, you know, the community probably wants to hear from you as well. But I know it's not the easiest spot to be in.
Well, we can all go through our calendars now, but I think for the sake of being expeditious, let's all agree to message Joe as soon as we know which meetings we would like to attend, so he can keep track in case there is an excellent quorum. Any other questions or comments on that item? Okay, next meeting dates. So the last meeting of the year is December 18th, diversity committee meeting in this room at 3:50 p.m. And then winter break, the 22nd through January 2nd of 2024. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Please stand adjourned. Thank you. Watch out for here.